Welcome back. The trend of digitization processes and automation of the business environment has been on the rise lately, and this is just as Nigeria ramps up processes for data protection, electronic means of identification, and the recent ratification of $3 billion for the automation of its ports. While experts advise companies to get ready for a future that will depend on end-to-end digitization, breaches in internet security protocols remains one of the top concerns of local businesses. And joining us now to speak to these developments and other matters arising in the ICT space is the Executive Director and co-founder of Seamfix, Mr. Chibuzor Onwurah. Good morning, Mr. Onwurah. Thanks for joining us on the program. Tell us, how relevant is digitization and automation of business processes in today's world across the public and private institutions, and the culture needed to realize digital transformation?
Thanks and good morning. I'm happy to be here. Digitization is essentially the ability to convert from analog to digital. And of course, when you are able to get this analog to digital ability, and then you are also able to influence your processes so that you improve. If you were doing this in a manual way before, you become digital, you become optimized, then you are beginning to talk about digitalization. And then also digital transformation now talks about the culture of change, of adaptability, the ability to move fast, the ability to be customer centric, and then also apply that technology into solving your customer problems. If you consider the world we live in today, the COVID pandemic that just happened, you will realize that businesses that were optimized for delivery, even without dealing physically with their customers, were able to thrive, and those that were not had to suffer. So if you ask me, I think it's very relevant at this time for anybody, anyone in business, whether you're in the public sector or in the private sector, to truly consider digitization and digitalization. You need to transform your operations so that you can serve your customers better. And as for culture, it starts with one, having a customer focus. You need to be obsessed about your customer, whether your customer is a citizen that walks into the government door or somebody paying you for your good or service. When you obsess about that person, then you are interested in solving their problems. You are interested in making them happy. You also need to have a culture of learning. You need to want to be able to learn, want to change, want to adapt. And then finally, you need to be agile, to not just learn, but also apply what you have learned. If you have that agility, that customer focus, and the ability to learn, then you're ripe for digital transformation.
Now, for me as a journalist, I can probably understand the digitalization of the media industry in Nigeria, but how well has Nigeria done generally in digitalization and digitization of processes?
Well, I think we are not doing too badly, although we can do a lot more. Like I explained when I just talked about digital transformation, there's also a culture shift, a mindset shift that needs to happen. So we are at the beginning stages, if you ask me. A lot of our government institutions and businesses are beginning to employ technology more in how they do their processes. But then it needs to seep in. It needs to get more into the culture of the way of life of everyone that is involved, be it the staff of the parastatals, be it the actual business owners, their employees. This has to seep in more and more. I think the recent pandemic that happened showed it to everyone that really, really, really there is no option. And what we are beginning to see is businesses beginning to use technology more. In Nigeria, people are beginning to use social media more so that their customers can discover them more. We are beginning to have cases of courts in various states that are now going online because they realize that citizens must go on. The legal system must go on, whether you're working from home or not. So yes, I think we are on our way. We are getting there. We are improving. We're not there yet, but the right ingredients are there. It's left for us to take it and run.
Well, yes, many may probably have seen the need to embrace technology as it is, especially because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, of course, you have also alluded to. But then there are some who are still asking, what do corporates stand to benefit from this?
Well, I think the world is changing, and it's changing very fast. Many corporates will need to realize that Their customers are no longer those who they can see physically and can walk in through the door. In fact, their competition is no longer just Emeka down the street. Their competition is global. Their customers, the customer base, the potential is global as well. So if you're a business and you realize that you can scale out what you do and you can have untold impacts just by your adopting a digital culture in your company, then I think it's a no-brainer. Same thing for government. If you realize that in government, in your parastatal, you can reach out as a federal government, you can service a lot more Nigerians simply by adopting technology. You can financially include them, you can give them an identity, you can provide social services to them without them needing to travel long distances to your offices. And you realize that it's literally a no-brainer. For us, there are certain things we say. There are 7 reasons why we think any business typically should consider consider digital transformation and digitization. You get a lot of insights into what is going on in your business, a lot of data, and you can now make relevant business decisions from that data. You have more access to customers. You can improve your service quality. Your customer experience is better. You just need to take a look at digital banks today and how a lot of the millennials are more interested in banking with the digital banks that are on their phone rather than walking into the banking hall. And of course, all this leads to an increase in revenue for you, and it helps you ensure business continuity. I think all these sound like music to the ears of any entrepreneur and of any government, any serious person in government. So there should be no second guessing. There should be no doubt about it. To speak using some examples that I have seen during this pandemic, we had various banks that utilize our solutions for customer onboarding ramp up the customers they were able to get, even though the banking halls were shut. The truth of the matter was that their mobile apps and their staff were able to still acquire customers and sell services to them, in essence, extending the banking hall into the homes of their customers. We had the telcos utilizing our services for customer onboarding also see a rise in their customer onboarding because people didn't need to travel. They could still get services in their homes. So the question for you and the question to any business is, do all these matter to you? Do you want to grow? And if you want to grow in the 21st century, digital transformation is the way.
But one major issue is that how do we address the concerns of internet protocol security that is often breached by hackers today, and that's coupled with the rate of cyber attacks and frauds in the banking system?
Well, cybersecurity and cyber fraud is a global phenomenon. Nigeria is not alone. We do not stop traveling because we have fears of accidents. What we do is to try and mitigate the risks. What we do is try to drive down the likelihood of that happening down to zero. But you do not stop traveling, you do not stop going to work, you do not stop going to see your family members because you think that there will be an accident on the road. So the same thing happens here. If digital transformation and a digital ecosystem is key, then we need to go ahead and not turn back because of cyber crimes. Now, having said that, you will realize that cyber crimes they are very successful many times thanks to the naivety of those involved. So both the banks and the institutions and the businesses have a role to play, but the individuals also have a role to play, and that's where a lot of education coming. You realize that many of the frauds include phishing attacks, include social engineering, fake websites, stealing of ATM pins. Some of these things are low tech, they are not high tech. So we tend to think of hacks and frauds and we think of a hacker behind the system or behind hundreds of systems. Oftentimes, it's as simple as your neighbor looking over your shoulder and stealing your PIN or sending you fake websites. And then when you go there, you give them your data and then they have access to your account. So there's a lot of education and re-education that needs to keep going on to let people understand the dangers and how they should protect themselves. As long as we continue to do this, and at the same time, institutions that choose to undergo digitalization keep adding processes that help them mitigate these frauds, then we'll all be better for it.
Now, this brings us to the role of the government. Now, how well has the government actually done in the area of digitalization and business automation?
That's an interesting question. The government has has tried, in the sense that there are some foundational things to consider when you talk about digitalization. There's a digital infrastructure that needs to be provided, and the government has gone some way in enabling the telecoms ecosystem such that we have connectivity around us. But more needs to be done. We need to have more broadband penetration around the country. Also, we need a strengthening of our digital platforms and government services. Government, again, is doing something in that regard with the provision of the national identity, which is key for the digital economy. As long as you can identify citizens, it becomes easier to provide services to them. Again, the government is making strides in this. All citizens are not yet covered, but many have been, and there are strides being done there. If you also look at the policy, the policy framework, because the laws are also very crucial. The laws need to evolve to take cognizance of this new world, of this new digital economy. And again, the government is making some strides there with the NDPR and various other data protection laws that are, that are coming up and being enforced, or policies that are evolving. So the government is making some strides there. And then finally, ICT skills, investments in training, and bringing up, bridging the gap, so that we don't just have people in Lagos, in Abuja, being the ones with the IT skills. Government needs to play a role in bridging the gap, so that people from low-income areas and the rural areas are also able to gain some of the skills needed to thrive in a digital economy. So I would say the government is making some moves, and they have actually been trying. More needs to be done, of course. Uhuru is not yet here.
And talking about the government making some moves now, of course, we saw the government recently concluding to have digital identification as a replacement of the plastic national ID card. Does that speak to digitization, or just some cost-cutting measures, perhaps?
I think it's a bit of both, because obviously a digital identity, either on your mobile phone or you printing out the slip by yourself, is cheaper than provision of the identity card. But we have to remember what exactly identity is here. We've always had digital identity in truth. For a long time, the government has actually enrolling us biometrically and providing us with a NIN number. We've all had digital identities. So the plastic card is just that. It's just a physical token for you to show your identity. It's no different from the NIN slip that you print out, and it's no different from the number that you remember in your head. What matters is what you do with that identity. So if the economy, if government institutions, if various businesses are able to leverage that number to verify it and verify that you are who you say you are, and then provide services to you, then that's all that matters. We all bank today with our BVN. We all have our BVN numbers. We all know our account numbers. Of when you were in school, you had your matric number. And as long as you had those numbers could identify you, and we could verify who you were and provide services to you. So it's not so much about the card. It's a physical token that would have been nice to have. But I think also the fact that the government is moving to, getting us to utilize the digital ID, showing it on mobile, helps us realize that we actually have a digital identity and it should be verified. I think it's a laudable move. Helps the government to save.
All right, we'd like to thank you, Executive Director and co-founder of Seamfix, Mr. Chibuzor Onwurah, for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you very much.